All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead, pour white lightning straight onto your brain. So, anything interesting happen over the weekend, Sam?
Oh, just a little bit. We might be talking a little bit of crime and punishment today because Sunday afternoon or early evening, my truck was stolen from the mall parking lot as I was at the little strip watching the football games. So there was that. Good
Ouch.
stuff. So I got up behind me some Nasib Taleb, the Black Swan, and Fooled by Randomness. And for those that don't know what the Black Swan is, it's seemingly unforeseen events that crash markets and how to identify them, and the other one's Fooled by Randomness, how to detach random events from uh, things you could have prevented, and then kind of post hoc analyzing so you don't make mistakes again. So was this random? That's the question.
Hmm.
Or did I set myself up for it? Well, well lit parking lot, very crowded. It was pretty much full because of the football games. Security, everything's pretty normal. Just a day at the mall. And I didn't park out in the middle of nowhere. I parked pretty much in the first group of parking spots closest to the and here we go with the electronic problems again. All right. Yeah, by the way, on this, if anybody knows about this, as I was getting ready, my AMD driver or something crashed and then restarted. So that actually might be the source of the problems because it was a
Could be.
graphic driver. So do those things go out?
The driver itself shouldn't crash. I mean, it could be out of date and be having issues, but it should. Those things are usually set to automatically update.
So could this
So,
be another thing that's not updating now that since I won't update to Windows 10?
ooh, yeah, that might be it.
Damn it, I'm gonna have to spend the money. Okay, so today we will have hiccups on my end sometimes, maybe visually at least. The audio seems to be working when we do everything. And I will go ahead and spend the money and update to Windows 10. And if that doesn't fix it, I'm going to probably take a sledgehammer to this computer after I buy another one. But back to the story. So well lit, patrolled lot, not in a a parking spot that you would think would invite something. It was just one of many vehicles in that lot. So it was the school of fish effect, safety in numbers. So from the outside looking in, it was a completely random event and everybody move on. But then there's this. Does my other screen come through even though my visual my
Yeah, there hasn't
okay.
been a problem with the screen you're sharing.
Look at the number one
Oh,
stolen car in Houston
I
and
was
look by
just
far
thinking.
by how much. Look by how
Uh,
much. It's more than double the next one. And realistically, you can combine the first two because they're the same truck, just different. I mean, Chevy and GMC are the same company,
yeah,
and the GMC Sierra is the same truck as the Silverado.
yep.
And so if you combine both of those, they're more than 6 times as likely to be stolen as the next one. So random or not,
I
a
mean,
little bit of
no,
both.
that's what I was thinking is that, I mean, it sounds to me like that your vehicle was probably targeted because it was a desirable vehicle.
Well, from what I understand from talking to the people I need to talk to get this resolved, it's not only desirable from they just basically steal them and chop them up
Hmm.
because the parts are very popular and they fit almost all models of all trucks. So they're very desirable from a part standpoint because they're super generic, and they're also apparently really easy to steal. Because the mall security was like, yeah, we have this rotating camera here. Takes about 3 minutes to get back to the same spot every time, and it takes about 2 minutes for them to steal one of these trucks. So
Oh, it kind of boggles my mind that that you would think that newer models, since practically everything has some form of GPS capability now, would make it a lot more difficult to steal a vehicle and get away with it. Because you would think I can just go get that. I know where it is.
Well,
Apparently
apparently
not.
it did have OnStar, but that got disconnected very, very quickly in
Mm.
the process. So
Yeah, presumably people would, yeah, the people who do this would know how to get around that.
yeah, so the next plan, first of all, no longer am I going to be driving a Silverado. I just don't want the headache. And so it looks like I'm going back to Toyota, by the way. I don't know why I switched from the Tundra. Anyways, gas mileage was what it was. That's what I justified it with. Because the only thing wrong with the Tundra is gas mileage. Maybe I'll go smaller with a Tacoma. I'm keeping my mind open. I just, I mean, they're really cool trucks. It's just, I'm so used to the bigger truck that when I get in the Tacoma, I feel like I'm cramped. So yeah, if I do that, I'll get used to it. But those are apparently very difficult to steal, except for the Tundras are targeted for their catalytic converters. So the people that go through lots and just do that,
Mm.
we'll target them. But that one has to be you pretty much have to park out somewhere where there's no patrols or cameras, because that's a longer process. Uh, but yeah, that's where we're at. I'm going to figure out what they're going to pay me for this truck, and the cop. But we were trying to be optimistic while talking to the cop. This and that. We check. Maybe we'll find it. There's this in the car and everything. And she looked at us. And she's like, "Yeah, that's cute. These cars never show back up." And she was very real with us. She was nice about it, but she was very real with us. Now the extra part to the drama was we had gone out. Me and my boys had gone out the night before, and uh, we were one of them made bad choices in going home, and he blew out two of his tires on a curb and Ubered the rest of the way home. So I picked him up the next morning, and the tire places were closed. So let's go. Okay, so let's just secure the vehicle. We'll come back and get it Monday when I have my break. He's like, okay, cool. Okay, let's go watch the football games. His keys fell out of his pocket in my truck
Uh-oh.
under the seat. And of course, we were just like, we'll get them later. So the truck got stolen with his keys in it, which he bought the truck secondhand and has no spare keys to it, and
That's
his house
problematic.
keys and his parents' house keys, which was probably where if a spare exists would be, but they're in California. And so two tires busted out. We went and bought a new one yesterday, but the back one he busted the rim. So we're just like, we'll put the spare on. You need the key to get the spare as a security measure.
Oof.
So things just started snowballing for him, but I don't feel bad about that one because he made bad decisions. And he's just lucky that's the only repercussion is a lot of money spent and annoyance. But that was my adventure day on Sunday. But Dallas still sucks.
Yeah, we'll get to that as a palate cleanser because I've got a lot of news articles to look at because I went down a rabbit hole. And I'm actually going to connect this to something else that's going on that bothered me over the weekend that I was watching a lot of. Um, let's see here. Yeah, your screen is all messed up. You may have to stop
Yeah,
sharing video.
I'm gonna do one more thing and then I will not touch Chrome or Firefox anymore because it seems to be doing better
Hmm.
when I don't. Let me make it to where it blows you up when you talk until that resolves. So if you're talking, you should be the only face on the screen.
Okay. All right. Let me share. Did you have anything more to
I do,
discuss?
but I do. It's funny, and it has to do with the football stuff. So
Mhm.
I'm just queuing it up, and then I'm going to get rid of my browsers.
Uh, I will say that I'm annoyed that Shanahan and Purdy are almost making me want to actively root for the 49ers instead of just rooting against the Eagles, who I can't stand. Um, so that's frustrating. But the other good thing about rooting for the 49ers is that if you're making uh city themed food for your Super Bowl party, then San Francisco is really easy. You just throw a bunch of used needles in a bowl and take a dump on it, and there you go. City of
Well,
San
they're
Francisco.
also easy because you just do rice-a-roni, but we did that the last time they were in the Super Bowl.
Well, I think that's more classical San Francisco. I have the more modern take on San Francisco.
Well,
All
I
right.
will I will have to figure out how to do a fusion rice-a-roni and heroin needles. Got it.
Speaking of steaming piles of crap. All right. So, um, the I'm curious because we follow different news sources, uh, mostly on purpose so that we don't cross the streams as much. And I'm curious how much you have uh heard of this, like how much the people you follow have been talking about this, and kind of what they've been saying, because uh, the sources I follow have been making a big deal about it, and even the lefty mainstream sources they share have been um, kind of hyperventilating about it and making a big deal about it. I mostly try to use uh, mainstream sources. I do have a few just because I'm lazy, like Breitbart and Red State stuff here, but they're kind of making a big deal about it. What have you been hearing?
Probably the same things, except it's a lot of them are just taking the take that this might be the because he refuses to not run again. Uh, that's why it's allowed to come out now. Because the big deal about this to me was those were found before the November elections,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the thing. So the news cycle is yes, left leaning stuff is reporting on it, which is great, but they strategically timed it to not affect the elections. So that tells me that this is specifically against him, not just them coming around to doing the right thing.
Yep. Yep. Um, that's actually uh it's actually a big part of the rabbit hole I'm going down here. Um, so Washington Post, democracy dies in darkness. Uh-huh, sure. Inside the White House document strategy and its pitfalls. Biden aides are said to have tried to defer to DOJ, lie low, and avoid Trump-like behavior. They got a political firestorm and then a special counsel. That is an interesting subheadline considering what is revealed here in this article. Um, now, according to, because this is basically Democracy Dies in Darkness, this article is basically a press release from the Biden White House. This is telling their story, okay? That one of Biden's attorneys just happened to accidentally find some classified documents. Oopsie. And now we'll do the right thing and contact the DOJ. Except um they reveal in this story that um they were working the DOJ and the Biden White House, which this shouldn't be a surprise. The Department of Justice is a member of the executive branch. Biden is the chief executive. They were working together to try and keep it quiet. That is curiously different. Now, this is the first and easy take, which is what a lot of the people on the right are spending their time on, which I just want to mention is that that's curiously different than the way they treated Trump's documents, isn't it?
Well, of course it is. You know there's going to be a double standard. but it does. It's funny because you're seeing obviously a double standard in how it's handled, but the end result is still the same strategy. Use these to prevent both of these guys from
Mm-hmm.
running again.
Mm-hmm. Um, so I've been listening to Dan Bongino again because he's this is kind of his wheelhouse. Uh, he was a member of the NYPD. I believe he worked in their intelligence department, and then he was a Secret Service member for the W and Obama administrations. So, and he was uh, a personal protection detail, which means he dealt with a lot of the most sensitive stuff. Okay, and so something that you might have heard of is that allegedly some of these documents are um, secret compartmentalized SCI, secret compartmentalized information. Now, if that's true, that's super illegal that they were there, not just that he had uh, top secret documents that he shouldn't have had. It is illegal to view SCI documents outside of what is called a SCIF. You may have heard that term thrown around before. Secret compartmentalized information facility. Because Bongino talked about when you go on the road with the president, he has to be able to look at this stuff. He can't go into the special room where this information is kept. So you have to build a special room basically where you have basically electronic eavesdropping jammers, you have white noise makers, and then you basically build a tent inside a room where you put this information because you cannot get it out and look at it outside of a special facility like that because it's that sensitive. So all this talk about the documents and how they got there and the talk of, the double standard, and I have yet to hear someone ask the question, how did they get out of the SCIF in the first place? Who took them out? And then in this article, something they don't raise is, hold on a second, Trump's personal attorneys are the ones that supposedly found this. They're the ones who supposedly got it together and were coordinating with the DOJ. They can't possibly have the security clearance to even be looking at these documents. So why are they the ones going through to find these secret documents? But, well, first, any thoughts you have on that?
Uh, I do have a thought on it because, but it's semi unrelated. I don't know if it's too far off, but my brain was just going there. All the statements by Biden of, oh, it was a locked garage, secure, secure, secure. And I was just thinking, well, a naked guy with a hammer got into Nancy Pelosi's house. So, I
Man,
mean,
that story disappeared quickly. I guess we'll find out what happened there about the same time we find out what happened at the Las Vegas shooting.
so logistically, a naked guy with a hammer could have been exposed to these documents. And it's just,
Well, and again, that's part of the point that Bongino was making about the SCI stuff is it doesn't matter how secure it was. It's not a SCIF. They can't be there if it's SCI. And the other point was, uh, we did the right thing. We immediately contacted the DOJ. Well, hold on. You did the right thing after 6 years. For 6 years, the government had no idea where these documents were. Anyone who went looking for these documents would not have been able to find them and would have no idea where they are. Another difference with Trump, and this is again when there's going to be a theme here. When the controversy first came out, it should have immediately disappeared and looked even worse for the Department of Justice than it already looked, because it immediately came out that the archivist knew about the documents, was working with the Trump team, was going back and forth because it's an administrative issue when the president takes documents, because the president is one entitled to a degree of those documents. This is, complicated stuff. You can go, I don't know if any of like the Rakita law or Viva Frei have talked about the legal aspect of this, but because the president is the basically the sole authority for declassification, there's an entirely separate law governing how he handles classified information, even a former president. So it was an administrative issue. They were going back and forth. They had sent people, the FBI even had gone in to look at the security of where the documents were, because that was an issue. So at no point did the government not know where these documents were, and at no point were they not secured by the government. Because remember, Trump has Secret Service protection as a previous president. So
Oh, mistakes were made. Something got slipped through the cracks.
a bunch
Just
of people died. Oh wait, no, that's a totally different double standard. Let's just move on. Okay, but here's the thing that to me, it's more than just the anyone who has had to suffer through a parent or grandparent with dementia knows what the heck is going on with Joe Biden. No, I'm not a doctor. Caveat, disclaimer, clearly not. But I can tell you about personal experience and sitting with my grandfather, as not only did what he say start to make less and less sense, but eventually the neurological degeneration reaches a point where it becomes more and more difficult to even talk,
well,
let
I
alone
don't
have everything come together and make sense.
I don't even think we need to do a medical diagnosis type analysis
Mhm.
because we have the history of the entire career of this man, and he just makes a lot of stupid mistakes
And make stuff up.
and then makes stuff up. Yeah,
Yeah.
he
So
will look you in the eye and tell you a story, and as if he completely believes it.
the easy conspiracy theory is that the powers that be within inside the party apparatus don't want him running because the only reason he was there in the first place was to be the back to normal guy, because all the other candidates were either far left loonies, or not correct enough on certain key issues like Tulsi Gabbard, so she was unpalatable, or there were one or two other normal candidates, but they didn't have the name ID. They wouldn't have done. They wouldn't have been able to, you know, make a good challenge to Trump.
Yeah,
So he was the
people
back to
like
normal
Andrew
candidate.
Yang or
Mhm.
yeah.
So he was the back to normal candidate, and now they don't need him and they don't want him. There's a bigger issue here, though, which is what was in the documents. Okay. A big part of what has been reported is that the top secret documents related to Iran, China, and guess number three,
Russia,
not
or the
exactly.
Ukraine.
All right. So for in non-political nerds, remember that Joe Biden, and he bragged about this again, let's go in the Wayback Machine and remember the first Trump impeachment lunacy. And here's why it's lunacy. So remember the timeline. Originally, the story broke, and it was a big deal because of what was alleged by this whistleblower, um, about this call with Zelensky. Because what was initially alleged was that there was a clear quid pro quo. You do this for me, and I give you this money in foreign aid. Okay. Well, that was dubious on its front because the president has broad authority to distribute certain kinds of money. So that was dubious to begin with. But then it should have gone away immediately when Trump said, okay, well, I'll just release the transcript and show you what we were talking about. Okay. And it wasn't what was alleged, but they still tried to make a big deal about it. The second time it should have gone away is when the video of Biden sitting on stage at the Council of Foreign Relations bragging about the fact that he got a prosecutor fired in return for $1 billion in foreign aid. So we impeached Trump for allegedly doing what Joe Biden bragged about doing. And keep in mind, too, that the reason Joe Biden was able to do that is he was the point man for Ukraine. Joe Biden visited Ukraine 6 times in 8 years while vice president. Interesting. He also pushed hard for more lethal aid, more weapons shipments to Ukraine that Barack Obama didn't want to go along with. Isn't that curious? This is from a Eurasia Daily, so this is from a regional thing, and this is from January 17th, 2017. So here's what's curious about this, because, okay, 6 times in 8 years. His last visit was during the middle of the transition, right before the inauguration of Trump. And his last visit was to the Ukraine, along with the CIA director at the time. Now, go away. They point out here he's been the key inspector. Old Joe, as they called him, has paid 5 visits to the Ukraine since that time. He's been talking with the Ukrainian president all this time. And in Ukraine, Biden was responsible for a wide range of issues, from appointments of personnel. It was he who forced Poroshenko to dismiss Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin in exchange for a $1 billion loan. They were talking about this January 17th, 2017, because they knew what the heck was going on in the region. We weren't paying attention because who cares?
Yeah. Well,
We
and
got our own
I
stuff to
think
talk
it's
about.
interesting on the timeline there, because it just so happens that that's right at the time when the Putin backing politician leader of the country was forcefully removed by a very unexpectedly well-funded insurrection.
If you want to go down another rabbit hole that we could go down, and maybe we will someday, are you familiar with the term color revolution?
I am not.
Go down that rabbit hole and see how George Soros funded NGOs worked with the State Department to help do that. And they mention here in the article, he is encouraging Kyiv to into fighting corruption, implementing reforms, blah, blah, blah. Okay, for the sake of argument, let's assume that the prosecutor general, Viktor Shokin, was as corrupt as they said he was. And that's why Biden said, get rid of him or you don't get this $1 billion guaranteed loan. Which guaranteed loan for, okay, that means if you can't pay it back, oh well, it becomes a grant. All right. Maybe that's true. Maybe Shokin was that corrupt. He conveniently forgot to mention that one of the things he was investigating was the company that Hunter Biden sat on the board of and was getting a buttload of money to, well, we don't know what he was doing. So far as we can tell, he never actually did a day's work for that company.
He was client relations, those friendly Russian women of the street or Ukrainian women of the street needed someone to talk to.
So, and this is also interesting that Obama's administration is doing its best to leave Trump with minimal room for foreign political maneuver, more specifically to bind him with a net of agreements and restrictions. So part of what Biden was doing and the Obama administration in the closing days of their administration was trying to make it to where Trump couldn't change what they had done and the deals they had set up in places like Ukraine. Now, this CNN article talks about that. And remember, that article was from January 17th, 2017. So this is all stuff that was known well ahead of time. This CNN article goes a long way towards uh, excusing the fact and trying to set the stage. Again, this is not a news article. This is a press release from the White House, just like that Washington Post article. Because what they're trying to set up here, shut up and go away, is that this was just an accident because of the early days were a whirlwind for Vice President Joe Biden, swearing in a new Congress, a surprise medal of freedom, and a speech at Davos, and one final trip to the Ukraine. So they don't point out here. Well, they kind of mention, they insinuate, but don't flat out say that
Oh, they also go for the heartstrings there too.
exactly.
Yeah. That has
What
nothing to do with his office duties.
what Joe Biden was doing during the transition was completely abnormal. This is not how transitions usually go. You are a lame duck. You're not doing anything. You're doing, some of the kind of show stuff like the Medal of Freedom uh kind of thing. And then your team is busy working with the incoming administration, working with their people to help with a smooth transition. It is not normal to go abroad giving speeches. And they're trying to say, well, it was just a whirlwind. Why? Why was he going abroad? Why was he making his one last trip to the Ukraine?
Well, this I can justify in and I'll kind of I can give the perspective of why I would say that that's reasonable looking at the man and then the people who would potentially vote for him.
Hmm.
He was if you have someone who had all the intentions of running for office the next time, you would want people you wouldn't want to be fresh on people's mind. You would want to have all these things that you were doing at the end. That being said, if you believe his presidential campaign speeches, he had no intentions of running
Hmm.
until Charlottesville, remember? So,
Well, and
uh,
he certainly wasn't acting like someone getting ready to run.
yeah, if he was in a mindset of I'm going to run in 2020, then I can see all of these things happening.
Well, see, to me, I can't because to me that makes it make even less sense. Because if he was planning on challenging Trump in 2020 all along, then he should have been staying home working on domestic politics, keeping his face and his name out there.
Well, let's face it, because he knows where the money is.
Ah, yes, follow the money. Isn't it interesting that in just the final 5 days of his vice presidency, Biden met in Kyiv with Ukrainian President Poroshenko and in Switzerland with Chinese President Xi Jinping, something that wasn't mentioned in the previously. So that's why he was in Davos. Isn't that interesting? Um,
It still blows me away how big Xi Jinping is with the WEF, considering China is still a semi-isolationist country, and the WEF is globalist. But
why am I bringing all this up? Well, let's take a seemingly uh random tangent to a January 9th of this year article in the Washington Post finally admitting that the Russian influence on the 2016 election was minimal to non-existent. Uh, Russian influence operations in Twitter in the 2016 presidential election reached relatively few users, most of whom were highly partisan Republicans, and the Russian accounts had no measurable impact in changing minds or influencing voter behavior, according to a study out this morning. The study, which reached the New York University Center for Social Media and Politics helmed, explores the limits of what Russian disinformation and misinformation was able to achieve on one major social media platform in the 2016 election. So the whole Russia election interference thing was basically a hoax. We're finally finding out in 2023. And it was also a major basis for the justification for the FBI's investigation into Trump, because supposedly, allegedly, there was collusion between the Trump administration, or the Trump campaign at that point, the Trump campaign and Russia to help Trump win the 2016 election. And we finally find out that that was all crap.
Yeah, but even still, if Twitter helps the Biden campaign, that's not the government affecting your speech. So if it was the Trump campaign, it's private industry, right?
Yeah. Oh, hey.
If a bunch of Russians want to help, I mean, let them.
This is an
That was
interesting
sarcasm, by the way. Don't clip me on that.
This is an interesting and random headline that has no bearing on anything we've been talking about here. Breaking: FBI official who investigated Trump ties to Russia was just arrested for illegal ties to Russian oligarch. Okay. On Saturday afternoon, former FBI agent Charles McGonigal, who was head of counterintelligence in the New York field office, and a part of the investigation into supposed ties between Trump and Russia, was arrested over his alleged ties to Russia. CBS reports that McGonigal was arrested over his ties to Oleg Deripaska, a Russian billionaire who has been sanctioned by the United States and criminally charged last year with violating those sanctions. As Business Insider reports, McGonigal was involved in the investigation in the Trump campaign's contacts with Russia during the 2016 election. Get in the Wayback Machine. Go to our episode where I brought up the Inspector General's reports on that investigation. And I talked about creepy Russian dude. I'm brain farting on his name. Who's kind of the modern day
Rasputin.
Yeah, the modern day Rasputin.
Yeah.
And
whose daughter was killed by the Ukrainians, by the way. A civilian in an act of war, by the way.
Yeah.
Of course, he was the target, but he's also a civilian. So
he's also a civilian. So some might call that an act of terrorism.
Well, it's technically a war crime. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway.
So don't worry. Russia's had plenty of war crimes in this.
Yeah.
It's just not one-sided. Like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's simply a matter of scale. So in that Inspector General's report, it was revealed that they knew from the beginning there was no contact. The thread that they were tugging on to get their FISA warrants and have the justification for this investigation was a supposed network connection between a Trump computer and something in Russia. And they knew from the beginning all this was basically email advertisement that someone in Russia had stayed in a Trump hotel, and you give your email address to everyone these days, and so they send you solicitations. Hey, book now, visit us again, and save 10%, and that kind of crap. They knew from the beginning that that's all it was. It was automated email solicitation, that there was no nefarious James Bond crap going on. They knew from the beginning. But
But wait, there's more.
wait, there's more. Okay, so whoops, I've got stuff out of order here. Why does this frickin' matter? So let's get in the Wayback Machine again and go not so far back. All the Twitter files dumps, every time we get one of those dumps, we need to play that clip of Zuckerberg on Rogan. Because this is just Twitter. And Twitter is a big deal. We've talked about this. Twitter's a big deal because of who uses it and who is influenced by it. But as far as reach goes, just raw numbers, it's not even close
Oh no,
to Facebook and
is
Google.
billions, where Twitter
Mhm.
is millions.
Mhm.
And that's an exponential scale. That's not a double. That's not a even a third.
Mhm. So remember what he said about the Hunter Biden laptop. Oh, well, the FBI came to us. Oh, wait, the same FBI that knew all along that there was no Trump-Russia connection, but investigated anyway. The same FBI that had a major official in their counterintelligence office just get arrested for ties to a Russian oligarch. That same FBI allegedly said, "Hey, this is there's something up there. There's going to be some Russian disinformation coming along. Just so happens that it's right before an election, and we need you to take care of it." Oops. Ex-top Intel official Douglas Wise knew Hunter Biden laptop, quote, had to be real, but signed disinfo letter anyway. A former top intelligence official who signed on to a letter attacking the Post's bombshell 2020 reporting on Hunter Biden's laptop as Russian disinformation has now admitted he knew a, quote, significant portion of the recovered files, quote, had to be real, but doesn't regret dismissing the expose. Well, sure, because as Sam Harris said, Orange Man is just that bad. There could be literal bodies. Douglas Wise, a former Defense Intelligence Agency deputy director, was one of 51 erstwhile intelligence brass who issued the public letter on October 19th, 2020, 5 days after the Post began a series of reports on the now First Son's shady overseas business dealings. That was why the laptop was important, because it detailed shady overseas dealings that were giving Hunter ludicrous amounts of cash to do apparently nothing. All of us figured that a significant portion of that content had to be real to make any Russian disinformation credible, said Wise, who didn't respond when the Post reached out for an explanation in March of last year, but found his tongue when he spoke to the Australian. Again, why is this important? Yes, this is from Breitbart, but they are citing a number of other things, and you could just get the book Laptop from Hell, or you can listen to Rudy Giuliani, who had the laptop. And reminder, Rudy Giuliani, at the time, personal attorney to President Donald Trump, had his office and residence raided by the FBI in clear and blatant violation to attorney-client privilege. And during that raid, they took a number of things, including things that he contends were confidential attorney-client privileged information. And the laptop's sitting right there, and he's saying, "Hey, y'all want to take that?" Nah, not interested.
Well, and this is the problem with the FBI, CIA, all of that. These are the best psychologically trained law enforcement personnel you're going to find. And when we talk about, oh, why don't they just clean house or whatever? Because the people who need to clean house probably have dirt on them. And I say that now because you brought up Giuliani. Remember, Borat trolled Giuliani fresh out of his divorce with a young hot model, got him up to the room and got him with his pants down, literally, and put it in a movie. We all have vulnerabilities, and the FBI and CIA will find it. And I guarantee you, every politician that can do something has something that can come out on them.
Well, also keep in mind, so this is actually kind of ties into your intro of about your truck and the what is seemingly random and what is not. And there's kind of an inverse to that too of you can have a conspiracy theory without really having a conspiracy
You could just
because
have a lot of people that end up having the same goal at the exact same time.
okay,
Because you
the
brought up Sam Harris, so
yep,
we got the laptop suppression, but with Sam Harris, and I brought up Eric Topol last time, who purposefully stopped the vaccine from coming out early just so Trump couldn't get credit for it before the election. Did he conspire with the people who stopped the laptop? Probably not.
were
But
all of
he,
these
yeah.
FBI agents in on it? No, they don't have to be. They just have to one or well,
Well,
think
the agents
similarly
themselves, they
and
just
be
have to follow
aligned,
orders, is all the thing. Yeah.
follow orders,
Yeah.
and or be networking. These are people who are part of the administrative state, part of the executive branch. Hey, we need you to do a favor for this really big, important figure in Washington. They don't have to say, and we'll help you out. It's known, it's expected. It's, I have friends in high places. This is going to help grease the wheels for my advancement in the executive branch, in the administrative state. So we don't want to look at the fact that, hey, that house where these documents were found was being paid for by Hunter Biden with his allegedly, apparently ill-gotten gains that he got for having shady overseas connections, the doors for which were opened in his own admission because of his last name. Should we maybe look and see if there's any connection to the guy who's running for and now currently president? Because this is how the grift works. And everybody is in on it. This isn't just Joe Biden. It's just he's in the news now. There are Republicans. Mitch McConnell has been alleged by Peter Schweitzer, who's a former CBS reporter and is now independent and writes, it focuses on corruption. And he has alleged that Mitch McConnell has the same kind of ties to the Ukraine. Why? Because forever there has been a pro-Europe and pro-Russia split in the Ukraine, kind of logically, because it sits right on the border there. Well, when you have a schism like that, there's political money to be made because you're going to have interests, which means you're going to have lobbyists, which means you're going to have hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars getting passed around. Ukraine is not a country. It is a giant laundromat. That's why we're sending millions of dollars in aid that nobody's paying attention to. There is no oversight on. Because we need to protect Biden and McConnell and who knows how many others laundromat.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah,
you
that's
use
the thing you kind of disclaimered there by saying, I know it's Breitbart. Don't look at what they're reporting as the problem. Look at what they're not reporting. They're not reporting the same thing about their own side. So it's not what they're saying that's the problem. That's pretty much all true as we're finding out here. It's the other side of it. What weren't they reporting on with McConnell or Bush or any of these other
This is why
parts of the machine on their side?
the scandal has to be about the double standard, Biden's irresponsible behavior, his potential law breaking, etc. The scandal cannot be what was in the documents and why did he have them? Why did he have documents about the Ukraine? Isn't it a little funny that in this laptop that was ignored by the media, suppressed, not ignored, suppressed by the powers that be in the 2016 election, that there are tons of documents in there alleging payment transfers, because this is how the grift works in Washington. You use public money to go to a public cause, and then those people turn around and funnel some of that money back to you in various ways. This is why, and Viva Fry was on this a couple weeks ago with the NTX scandal, talking about why aren't we
FTX.
FTX? Why aren't we paying closer attention to this? Because this looks like a money laundering operation. And he's talking about in the legal sense that this is how money laundering works. That this guy gave tons of money to these people who would then help him with regulations and protection, which would let him make more money, which would let him funnel it back to these people. So part of the Ponzi scheme there, or whatever kind of scheme you want to call it, is where did this money go? Because a big chunk of it went to politicians. Why
Mhm.
aren't we talking about that?
Well, I mean, it's as simple as if everybody is losing money, somebody's gaining it.
Yeah.
And if everybody's losing it, that means it's a small few gaining it. And a lot of people lost FTX money. Tom Brady cannot retire right now because he had almost all his money in FTX.
Um, shoot, where was it? Okay. So here we go. I mentioned this before, and this is part of the scheme and the scam, is that you have this public-private partnership. The same thing that we hear about with the World Economic Forum crowd and the Davos crowd and the collusion between regulatory agencies and big drug companies and all of this other, and it happens everywhere. So, along with pressuring, um, shut up, along with pressuring Ukraine to get rid of this prosecutor who was looking into things that they didn't like looking into. The part of the story that they didn't talk about in that Eurasia article, because it's coming out from this guy John Solomon, and The Hill is probably kind of right leaning, but it's more of a middle of the road political
Yeah,
news
the
organization.
Hill's actually decent about being balanced. They
Hmm.
actually, and a lot of people that call them right, they've actually shifted left in the last 2 years. They got
Yeah,
rid of Crystal and Sagar. They got rid of uh oh gosh, two of my favorites, and I'm blanking on the names all of a sudden. But the little girl, the blonde girl with the glasses, and the kind of boring guy that's a lefty, but he's really sharp.
mhm.
Uh, but yeah, they got rid of them because they wanted to keep reporting on the controversial topics. And so then and after they got rid of them, Robbie's still okay. I actually like Brianna Joy Gray, even though we would disagree on the finer points of
Mhm.
everything. But then they brought in some New York lawyer, CRT all the way, lady, and she knows how to talk it. So she's got the legal training to
Mhm.
basically talk circles around you, and so it's actually shifted to that side of the aisle. But people still call them right wing because they still will report on non-mainstream topics.
And without the mainstream narrative.
Mm.
It that that's
Yeah,
that's the sin
I like
is
Robbie. I just wish he would stop trying to be technical with the COVID stuff because he has no legitimate understanding of the physiology behind it. But as far as his freedom of speech type stuff, I love him.
so this article and the whole investigative report by John Solomon is a prime example of how useful idiots work, because there's this Soros-funded organization that is the Anti-Corruption Action Center. Okay, they were off limits to Ukrainian prosecutors. So not only did they get this head prosecutor fired, but then the embassy went to them, again, allegedly, with a do not target list of these people are off limits. You can't investigate them, you can't prosecute them. They also had a list of, oh, but you should look into these people. So the focus on Aunt C, whose youthful street activist famously wore Ukraine F corruption t-shirts, was part of a larger probe by Ukraine's prosecutor general's office, yeah, that guy, on whether 4.4 million in US funds to fight corruption inside the former Soviet Republic had been improperly diverted. Okay, so there's this schism between pro-Europe and pro-Russia. So there's lobbying money to be made and thus funneled and thus laundered through Ukraine. Big sums of money. Well, if you are a youthful street activist, you probably don't know or care about any of that. What you care about is, hey, why is there so much corruption in my country? Why aren't my elected officials being responsive to me? Kind of like Antifa. Antifa kind of rhymes. And how many times have we heard about funding an organization with Antifa and hey, where does this come from? Same thing. This is touching on what I referenced earlier with the color revolutions. And I referenced this back when I talked about Creepy Rasputin guy, that this was during the time where there was a massive, that eventually turned violent, protest over an election where there was wide scale internal and international allegations of corruption and shenanigans with the outcome that caused the fall of this administration that had been pro-Russian. So the US, the State Department, in coordination with these NGOs, was involved with bringing down this regime.
Oh yeah,
I'm old
the
enough.
head of the State Department was on. I think it was Stephen Colbert bragging about what they did
Uh-huh.
at the time.
So Politico, left-leaning, again, getting in the Wayback Machine and going back to 2017. So
Now, when you say Wayback Machine, are you speaking figuratively or did you actually use the
no,
Wayback
this is still
Machine?
on Politico's website.
Okay, because sometimes they scrub it, but you can use the Wayback Machine
Hmm.
to see the original
Yeah,
articles.
I should probably, because there have been times that people have to go to the Wayback Machine because, ooh, stuff magically disappeared.
Well, and you got to make sure that the article you read isn't at
Mhm.
least fudged in a way that you wouldn't notice it reading it, but it got rid of some key details or
Again, 2017, in the height of the Trump-Russia collusion narrative, and with a straight face, the left-leaning Politico writes this article about how Ukrainian government officials tried to help Hillary Clinton and undermine Trump. This gets kind of dark because again, it's hard to say because there's a lot of corruption and Ukraine is not a country, it's a laundromat. So you remember Paul Manafort, who's kind of a creepy, dirty guy, worked for Nixon. I believe, wait, it was either him or Roger Stone, who was also connected to Trump, uh, who was known as Nixon's dirty tricks guy. That was like his unofficial title, the dirty tricks guy. Well, shortly before the election, um, top campaign aide Manafort, who had connections to Russia. Well, He was lobbying on behalf of these pro-Russian organizations. There's money to be made in the Ukraine if you get on one side or the other, because you've got all this Russian oligarch money coming in, and you've got all this Western European and American anti-Russian money coming in. Well, in the lead up to that election, something they don't really go into here, uh, Manafort was indicted. I believe he was indicted by the Ukrainian prosecutor, the new one, who magically found this black book. It was like have you seen The Untouchables? And they get the ledger from Capone's accountant.
Hmm.
So they magically found something like that was like this huge smoking gun
We
that
could use
detailed
we could use Maxwell's.
mhm, that that detailed all this terrible stuff that Paul Manafort was doing. And they couldn't establish any sort of authenticity or chain of custody to it, curiously. So you've got all these Ukraine connections, which we're not allowed to talk about because the laptop is Russian disinformation. Meanwhile, you have all these connections between leftists and Democrats and Ukraine, and also the Republicans. But what we're talking about here is Biden because big deal. Uh, DOJ shuts down China-focused anti-espionage program. Hey, remember how
Hey,
I
can,
said,
can we pause for a second? I'm getting a call
huh,
and I want to make sure it's not claims or something.
okay,
I apologize. As we started this with, I'm in a claims issue with my truck, and so numbers that I don't recognize coming in, I'm answering instead of just letting one
which
go to
is annoying.
voicemail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so when I left off, I was on this. I had swerved to China. Why? Well, as I mentioned earlier, one of the allegations is that the documents involve Iran, China, and Ukraine. Isn't it curious that the DOJ shut down a China-focused anti-espionage program in 2022, uh, February of 2022? And again, this is Politico, definitely left-leaning. And um, because it was racist, basically. Okay, except I've mentioned this channel before, and they have a Rumble channel, so watch them there, not on YouTube, because YouTube sucks. China Uncensored. They talk about this a lot. And it's not a matter of being disloyal. The Chinese government purposely pressures uh, Chinese nationals living abroad, or even Chinese Americans, to give them information. And if you are a recent immigrant or a Chinese national, you have family over there. So there's always the threat hanging over your head that your family will be punished if you don't play ball. And so there are numerous instances of Chinese nationals giving sensitive information to the Chicoms. And this is a major place this is done is in universities, think tanks, research organizations. Why is that important? Well, for one, because of the laptop we're not allowed to talk about, except I guess we're kind of allowed to talk about it now. One of the major allegations in there is from emails and texts talking about an official visit then Vice President Joe Biden took to China. On that trip were Hunter and John Kerry's son. Why was that important? Well, because they had just started this massive equity money management company. Neither of them had any background in this kind of money management, and yet they were able to get a huge investment from China involving uh the basically their social security fund. So that level of money, like the government pension fund, was being invested with this group.
Did you
That's a
ever
ludicrous amount of money.
did you ever notice the draw option on the left of the share screen? Bottom left. Let's see if this shows up. Does this show up for you? I just drew a circle around one of the paragraphs.
Yep.
Sorry, I just noticed that. Carry on.
Okay. So
Oh, can I erase that? I don't want people to think that's important. Unless it is important. Are you about to talk about it?
it's just part of the same of, oh, this is racist, so we don't the excuse is we don't want to hurt people's feelings, we don't want to create bad perceptions. A stated rival, they have stated repeatedly they want to bring us down and want to supplant us and be the world's lone superpower hegemon. And we're going to ignore that because we don't want people to get feelings hurt. And again, useful idiots. I'm sure there were people who agreed with that, thought, yeah, that's a good idea. Um, there were probably also people who knew that this would really help out the Bidens. Speaking of that, so this is from a Just the News article. And so they ask some questions here about when was this? This was January 10th, 2023. And this is from John Solomon, the guy I referenced earlier. So he's been doing a lot of investigative reporting on the Bidens. And one of the things he says here is of why this is important is, did any foreign powers have access to the office space where the documents were found? Because again, the initial group of documents were found in a Penn, as in Penn University, Pennsylvania University Biden Center, which was a think tank. And so Biden has bragged before about him being a professor. He wasn't a professor. He had a honorary doctorate and a cushy position with Pennsylvania University where he got paid a ton of money to show up a handful of times and give some speeches. Okay, so this was something like over 4 years. And if I recall right, he showed up 5 times to give like speeches and lectures. And I don't want to reference the number because I can't remember that off the top of my head, but it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Again, this is how the grift works. He's not the only one who does this. We're just talking about it because he's the freaking president, and this is really concerning stuff because Penn University helps him establish this think tank. Tax implications there. You move the money around. This nonprofit think tank part of a university. The latter question took on added significance Monday night because it has been known for years that the University of Pennsylvania received extensive Chinese funding, estimated in some media reports at $54 million. Around and after the time Biden announced his policy think tank was going to be part of the university's Washington program. This is why it was important at the beginning. This is why the surface level reaction to this of the double standard is important. Not just because we want to put on team jerseys and say, you mean to Trump, me like Trump. No, because those documents were under Secret Service protection. The government knew where the documents were. They knew how they were secured. And because the Secret Service was on site, they knew who even potentially had access to them, let alone actual access to them. They knew who even potentially had access to them. We have no effing idea who went into these offices and checked these documents out, looked them over. We do know that China routinely uses uh, universities and think tanks and research organizations to get sensitive information. And we do know from the laptop that there appear to be some financial connections between the Biden family and Joe Biden. Do you remember General Michael Flynn and why he was the first administration official ousted and quite quickly in the Trump administration?
I know who Michael Flynn is, and I know he had the the long case and was ultimately exonerated.
Ultimately exonerated, and the allegation was that he was an unregistered foreign agent, meaning it's not illegal to be a foreign agent, but you have to disclose that. You have to disclose, I'm lobbying on behalf of, I think his connection was, I don't remember if it was to Turkey or Russia or both, but I'm getting money on behalf of these guys, this country, to lobby our government for favorable action policies, etc. Joe Biden appears to be, or at least have been, an unregistered foreign agent. He was receiving backdoor money, lots of it, from Ukraine and China, and who knows who else, in order to push or straight up enact, because he was part of the executive branch, favorable policies to those people. So Zuckerberg, who bragged about his election fortification scheme, and then said out loud, yeah, we suppressed the Hunter Biden laptop at the behest of the government, helped elect someone who is, I would say, probably at the least, you could say potentially a paid foreign agent.
The sad thing about this particular person is I can see it as it just being, I don't care where the money's coming from, I'm getting the money.
Yeah, but he's been in politics long enough. He knows how the grift works, right? So he has, since he was 29 years old, he has been in elected office, and he lives, so he hasn't had a real job. The only time he was been out of government were those 4 years between leaving the Obama administration and running for and being elected president. It's the only time he's been in private sector. And yet, curiously, he lives like a multimillionaire. He has something like 4 houses, big ones. That's why that Hunter Biden paying for that house matters, because this is how the grift works. I don't get direct money. So people think pay for play quid pro quo government corruption looks like, somebody meeting in a parking lot to hand over a briefcase of money. No, they're not that stupid. I mean, some of them are that stupid. That does happen, which is why it's so salacious when it does. But the overwhelming majority of them know how the grift works is you give money to my think tank, my political action committee, this close friend of mine, or my family member. They pay for they don't even have to funnel money directly over again, because that's a paper trail. They're not that stupid. They're just
Well, this is
paying
the
for my
reality of
life.
the world. This is just like with college admissions. You think the equity programs are going to get in the way of the legacy kids? No, if you drop admissions of males let's see, white males would be about 35% of the population, 33% of the population. If you cut admissions down to 10% for white males, it's going to be the 10% that all have connections and are legacy kids. So all you didn't stick it to the man. You didn't create an equitable environment. You just pushed the poor kids that might be gifted out of the way. And this is how it works everywhere. These people get the jobs, they get everything is just handed to them, and the only time it doesn't work is when they do something so dumb that they can't be saved by that legacy. And I think that's where we're finally getting to that tipping point. You know, Joe Biden's what, 80 years old? 80, 80
something, I think.
he's 81 or 82 or something along those lines. It's too late for anything to be really. I mean, you take that all the way to your 80s, you've done good.
Mhm.
But his son is probably going to be in his 40s, getting hit by this. 50s getting hit by this.
Mhm.
It's but that's the rarity. That's the exception to the rule, because most being a public figure made it harder to not be dumb. But at the same time, most of these people just coast through. You can make the same thing about Trump, because he had rich family that pushed him through, and then he pushed it a little farther, and his kids are benefiting from that as well. It's not those guys that are going to suffer no matter what. They may get a little social suffering here and there, but it's the people like myself that were gifted and needed to go to school to get out of the situation that are getting thrown out.
Yeah.
So that's why they support it. They basically narrowed the playing field for the success of their kids by supporting these programs.
And everyone is paying for it. Hey, how's that inflation going? Because again,
It's not
there
technically inflation because wages have not gone up with it. It's only inflation if everything goes up.
I will refer you to the new term that was invented in the Carter administration because his economy was so bad, economists had to invent a new term. Because, yes, technically, theoretically, the way it's supposed to work is that everything goes up, even wages. They invented a new term in the Carter administration called stagflation, that somehow you have inflation rising rapidly, and yet the economy stagnates. It can happen. It's just really effing rare. You really have to screw up to make it
Yeah,
happen.
but it's still technically not inflation. It's stagflation.
How's your grocery bill? Let's put it that way.
Well, I could tell you one particular item, which has been pretty consistent for a long time, was HEB chicken breasts were $1.99 a pound for freaking ever.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're if you can get it $2.99 a pound, then you did good.
I used to eat a ton of eggs because it was a cheap source of protein.
Well,
Used to.
yeah, and you can do anything with it.
Yeah. So
Oikos
there
hasn't
goes that
gone
one.
up though. Oikos 000, our sponsor, one of these days.
I usually get the 10-pound bag of leg quarters at Kroger because they have been for a long time because they're not a very desirable cut, 69 cents a pound.
Giggity.
And
Especially
again, you
since
can do
it's
a
the
lot with
leg
that.
quarter.
So I'll do several different things with them, but one of the things I do is when I get home, I immediately throw a half the bag into my pressure cooker and cook it like 15 minutes, pull off all the meat, throw the skin and bones back in there, and now I've made myself some stock and I've got all this shredded chicken to do stuff with. So that is one of my go-to sources of protein because it's one of the few that are still cheap. The point being, all of these elected officials who are our employees are using our money in a giant money laundering scheme that they're all in on to funnel public money to private or semi-private organizations, which eventually funnels back to them. This is how you have all of these people. I mentioned Joe Biden because, again, it's a big effing deal that our current president may have been or be an unregistered foreign agent, and because it's in the news, and because you have this huge paper trail, in large part because he so screwed up his family that Hunter Biden is a coked up mess. That's
Well,
why
was a
that's
coked
why
up
the
coked
laptop
up mess.
exists. Huh?
Was a coked up mess.
Was, yes.
Well, no,
Totally
no,
blew
no.
down,
This is
sure.
this is one that I hate the right leaning media's take on it, because if he is recovered, good. And in fact, you could put a pattern together where he's letting this stuff come out as kind of a repentance.
Hmm. But the scheme still goes on
Yeah.
because part of his recovery is he had taken to painting. I've seen some of those paintings and I've seen what people are paying for them.
People do paint better on drugs, not off them, but
Yeah. So the scheme still goes on.
yeah.
You know, that uh,
Well, and but again, I'm talking the repentance route. I mean, put yourself in. This is where empathy actually works, right?
mhm,
So
mhm.
put yourself in his situation. I want the truth to come out, or at least I want something to be done, but I also see on the other end how bad my life is going to be if I let everything come out. If I can kind of get a soft change going, then maybe I can do good, but not like be in jail the rest of my life, being raped in the butthole, right? So put yourself in his position, and that's a scary proposition.
Well, what one of the
Or
most
even the fact that I mean, again, the FBI, CIA, all these things have everything on everybody. They knew about the laptop. That was probably something they had on Biden to get him to do things they wanted to do. We also maybe he's afraid of getting Epsteined or something along those lines. Little accidental fuck ups to get the truth out versus just coming out and being
well,
open
I
and
think
honest.
if that's the case, at least from what was, reported, the guy who had the laptop talked about it that when he went in there to give him the laptop, he was out of it. The Hunter was out of it. He
Mm-hmm.
was on something.
Well, theoretically, the rehab was after that.
Yeah, yeah. But one of the more disturbing emails from that laptop was an email that Hunter sent to his daughter, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it was something to the effect of, I hope one day you don't have to be in the position I'm in, but you can appreciate what I've done for this family for however many years, basically his whole adult life, having to uh do everything for this family and pay for everything and give half of everything I make to the family and to my father. There really was a tone of resentment, frustration, all of these things that could lead you down a dark path because, I mean, clearly he's had a pretty effed up life, and you're having to do all of this. You have all of this expectation on you to do all of this stuff to prop up your whole family and let them live like multimillionaires, even though they're public servants. You have all of this pressure on you, and you're not the good son. The good son died of cancer,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah, that's going to lead to drugs and alcohol.
Well, and then addiction's a bitch. And if you're addicted to the wrong things, which he was on some pretty heavy shit, you're going to do some pretty stupid ass shit. And it becomes a cycle
Hmm.
where he's doing these things that he has to do as family. Then he basically gets out of his own head by using chemical substances. And then he does something that could hurt his family or himself. And then he hates himself for it and tries to make up for it, and then goes down that ever going spiral. This is not that we should exalt the man or anything along those lines, but you got to understand how addiction works and how childhood trauma works. uh, People come out of it okay, and we always like to prop them up like there's some bastion of
Hmm.
civilization. but I wouldn't even say 9 out of 10. It was probably 99 out of 100 are on the other end of it, no matter how rich you are. In fact, even probably more so if you're rich because people cover your tracks.
Mm.
And I mean, he's in that cycle, or he was. Hopefully, he's out of that cycle and he's trying to make up for it. But it's a rough thing because he has put himself in a hole while he was trying to do the biddings of his family, and he could make up for one, but he would basically kill himself in the process.
How messed up. And again, it's not just the Biden family. Stop hyper focusing on that, right? It is an indictment of the whole system. How messed up is this family, and how prevalent is this situation that, to your point, being not just wealthy but being connected, that the Biden family was more interested in covering up and cleaning up Hunter's messes than getting him help because they needed him to continue the grift. How messed up is that? And these are the people that we choose to rule over us.
Yeah, and if anybody's out there saying, well, I mean, if you listen to us for this long, you're probably agreeing with us. But if anybody's out there saying, who would do that to their child? And this is why these movements are run by women, because they think that way. Who would do this to their child? Well, here's your response. Any psychopathic narcissist would do that to their child.
Yeah.
And tell you straight to your face they're doing their child a favor. Well, that got dark. Is that the dark place you wanted to go?
Oh
But
no, I got something way worse that we can talk about next time.
okay, well, we'll probably
Way worse.
let's tease that and then let's do NFL.
Well, it's about child abuse, the Rainbow Mafia, and objective morality.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm an expert in child abuse. Not, I mean, I
Not
know a
not
lot
as a
of.
perpetrator, not as a perpetrator.
No, yeah, exactly. Thank you. Sorry, someone will clip that. I have a past of being on the other end of that stick. Uh, okay, so we can go down that road. Uh, before we get into football, I wanted to show you this.
Oh no.
There you go.
Sounds about right.
I actually was a little distracted during that game, so I didn't get to watch the details of it, but
All right. So after that rabbit hole, let's move on to, oh man, crap. I just remembered that I was going to connect that to something, but I don't know if I want to talk about it or not.
well, what is it? And
We're running late, and
yeah, let me think if we
yeah.
can talk about quickly.
Have you been following at all this Crowder Daily Wire feud?
It keeps popping up on my shit, but I don't really care. But I did hear enough of it. I think this was one of the few times I listened to Fry recently. He gave kind of just the details of it. And then knowing other people that are associated with the Daily Wire, it makes sense because he's making it this whole you're trying to suppress my speech thing. But then I think of Jordan Peterson and the way he's been conducting his interviews recently is he does about an hour and a half that's YouTube friendly and then says, hey, if you want to continue this conversation, he does another half an hour on the Daily Wire. And that's
Yeah.
the thing. It's not about suppressing your speech. It's about understanding the business model to the fact that we need YouTube for our success.
Well, yes, I do think Crowder's a very emotional person if you ever watch him. He is, to his credit, he is a thinker, so he will go deep on topics and he will have, all his ducks in a row and sources and thoughts so that, he gives you a cogent argument. But he does it in a very emotional and impassioned way. And he will sometimes go off on tangents because of that. So there is a degree of emotion and maybe it's a little overblown, but
Well, I just
the
don't
re
understand why he can't look to his predecessors recently, like Peterson, and just be like, look, I'm not being suppressed. I just have to be cognizant of which parts are going to be on what platforms.
Well, no, but to his point, and I don't usually watch Tim Pool, but I watched because it was 2 hours with Crowder on Monday, and I wanted to see,
Okay, I have not
you
seen
know,
that one. Yeah.
because I just watched Crowder's first two videos on it, and then the Jeremy Boring, the Daily Wire reaction to it. And I don't want to get into the drama, and it's because the drama's stupid, the personal feuds are stupid, because here's what matters, and here's his main point. The main point of his first video, and this was what I thought was so disingenuous by Jeremy Boring, is that he made a very leftist kind of attack, making it all about the money and
Mm,
making Crowder seem greedy, when the entire point of his very first video was, you are doing the bidding of big tech while you're claiming to fight the system. That you are giving big tech a heckler's veto on people who are supposedly fighting the system. They are supposedly iconoclasts being free to say what big tech doesn't want them to say. And for me personally, this kind of resonated because I listened to a lot of Daily Wire people, mainly Ben Shapiro, during the Trump administration. They were on my regular podcast rotation. And around the 2020 election, I started to get annoyed and stopped paying attention to them. And I eventually unfollowed, unsubscribed from them even, because it wasn't just that they weren't talking about certain topics. It was they were talking about certain verboten talking topics with the narrative talking points. And it frustrated and confused me at the time, and now makes perfect sense. If part of your business model is that you can't get kicked off of these social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, because that is part of your business model to create reach, then it makes perfect sense why you're parroting narrative talking points about the 2020 election. You're parroting narrative talking points about the pandemic and the jabs.
well, I made this comment about Vinay Prasad and Z Dog. They would buck the system in all the ways they could, but then when it came to the things that would get you banned, they kind of washed their hands Pontius Pilate style
Yeah.
on it.
Eh,
But an example of someone who does it right. Peterson is an example who someone who does it right. But another one that we've listened to together, Dr. Drew. He's got a point where he knows he's going into the controversial topics, where he keeps it pretty clean in the beginning of his thing, and then about 30 minutes into it, especially when Dr. Victory comes in, he's got a little disclaimer that says, uh, YouTube and other platforms have banned the talk of controversial topics. If this video stops here, find the rest of it on drdrew.com. So it's a model where you don't have to bow to the system, but you understand the fact that if your word is taken down, it's not out there to begin with.
well,
So
but
you can get the first part of your word in and then get a way to funnel people to the full talk. And that's what Peterson's doing with the Daily Wire and the way he structured it. And that's the way Dr. Drew does it to get people to his own website. And yeah, he makes more money if you go to his website. But at the same time, he can't get people to go to his website without at least having part of it on the YouTubes.
there's a problem, and where Crowder, this is why I think it's 70-30 on in Crowder's favor, is because there's two big problems with that. That one, you're still giving no the first big problem with that is honesty, is that the Daily Wire is not being honest about their system. They are portraying themselves as the biggest conservative network, and that they are fighting the system, they are fighting big tech, when they allow a heckler's veto by big tech. The other problem with that is that I was going to say Crowder's a special case, but he's not, because it's happened before. He's just one of the most prominent cases. That YouTube in particular and others in general, they will they will take you down for stuff that happens off the platform. Alex Jones was banned across the board, not necessarily for anything he said on those platforms. Crowder has the same thing has happened to him. That
Well, the thing about that though is Alex Jones is the controversial topic.
well, he is because it's all about personality, but he's the excuse. What he talks about is what they don't want talked about. So that's why he has to go, and that's why you have to make him the poster child of the crazy conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, and now one thing I did understand was, I mean, it was a very the deck was stacked from the beginning with Crowder because he is permanently demonetized on YouTube already.
Yeah,
So that contract in general was already a hit.
yeah. It's do you
Because
even know
yeah,
who I am? I
yeah,
have not been monetized
because
for
even if he
3
goes on
years.
and is a good boy, it doesn't mean anything because he's already there is no monetization
I
to it.
already have
Yeah,
all these strikes. I haven't been
yeah.
monetized for 3 years. So his model is
What I'm saying
different.
is maybe it's a transparency and honesty thing, not necessarily. And maybe this brought it out. Maybe this put it in the limelight, but it needs to be addressed that way. It's Daily Wire needs to come out and say, okay, this is unfortunate with Crowder. I guess we can't do business with him, but we do this way because, and let me show you an
Yeah.
example of how it works, right? Just like I said,
Hmm.
you know,
Well, yes. And also to Crowder's point, it doesn't have to be that way. That Crowder has cat why the wife is in the office, so now her cat has decided that I want attention and I don't care what you're doing. That okay.
well, I mean,
Um,
it's never a bad thing when the pussy wants attention.
hello. The reason I
I
brought
mean,
it up
we're
though,
already demonetized, or we're preemptively demonetized.
unmonetized,
I'm
yes.
sure. Yeah. So
Um, the reason I brought it up is because it connects to this Biden story, because the whole reason we're here is because big tech decided we're not allowed to talk about this topic, and it was suppressed. Either banned outright like Twitter did, or as Zuckerberg talked about, oh well, we didn't ban it, we just made sure no one ever saw it.
okay, so let's put a pin in this because I have a deeper dive into something else that is connected to this, and it's in the omnibus bill.
Hmm.
In the omnibus bill, in all 4,000 pages, and I just came across it, so I didn't have it ready because I'm gonna have to read through probably about 1,000 pages to find it because the person who brought it up said it's somewhere between 2,500 and 3,500 in the pages, but it's 19 lines, and in that bill, it potentially gives the FDA the authority to prosecute people who use drugs and devices off label in their doctoring mode if
I
they
guess
deem that it was not appropriate.
I guess the little blue pill is banned now. That that is an off-label
Oh
drug.
yeah, it is. Well, but it was FDA approved for the other
It
thing
was
now
then
too.
approved for
Yeah.
that, yes, but that's how it was discovered.
No, but what you're talking about the money and
Mhm.
everything, you look at it, the the person that I heard talking about it was trying to put the best light on it as if this was something they were trying to do all along.
Mhm.
But because the question posed to him was, do you think that the off-label use of drugs for COVID was what spurred this? And they were trying to put a good light on it, that it was something they were trying to do for a long time, which is probably true. But the current events were the lowering of the hand that allowed the right cross to make connection, right? And what it does is allows the FDA to preferentially treat drugs that can be charged by big pharma versus drugs that are no longer under patent.
Funny how that works.
Funny how that works, considering these guys retire from the FDA to go work for these companies. So it's a you scratch my back, I scratch yours, and it's in a bill that has nothing to do with medical licensure
Yeah.
or farmer. It's in the freaking infrastructure bill.
Well, that brings up more stuff that I wanted to talk about too. So, well, we can go down that
Yeah.
rabbit hole next time.
Yeah,
The reason
I'll
I
get all
brought
the
up the
receipts to it, and I'll make sure, actually I'll make sure that the person I heard it from was telling the truth too. So I don't want to. This is why we like to marinate, not just because there's a lot of reading involved,
Mhm.
and I got to figure out what's going on with my camera, why I can't share screen and be shown.
So
But
the reason I brought up the Crowder Daily Wire feud though is because it's part of what we were spent this whole hour and a half ranting about is how many people didn't know any of this crap about Biden and the Biden family and these international connections because it was verboten, it was banned by big tech.
well,
Okay.
and
So
again, I think the solution is use use the model to funnel people to your place where you can talk
right.
openly, but be open about that.
But and that's where the contract, not contract, offer sheet that they sent. It was a pre-contract. That's where the offer sheet that Daily Wire sent was so problematic because it wasn't just, well, okay, obviously, if you get demonetized, then we're going to reduce your fee accordingly because we're not making any money off of those systems. It was, we are punitively punishing you. And this is a major thing that was a red flag for Tim Pool is he said, oh, wait a minute, you get a 20% or whatever it is penalty if you get demonetized or banned from Facebook. Well, what if you had zero viewership on Facebook? Then they're not losing any money, but they're punitively punishing you, which is where it makes it seem like you're doing the bidding of big tech. That's a
See, Viva read
problem.
it differently, and he was reading directly from the documents.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Uh, in contractual things, I would probably err with Viva, but it doesn't mean he's right
The
because he
the
also doesn't know U.S. law as well. So
the big problem to me, hasn't he moved to Florida?
he has moved to Florida and he is
Yeah.
in the process of transferring his licenses. But
That's what I thought. Um, so the big worry to me and where this is depressing to me is that you would think that you could trust these alternative platforms, but if they're basically playing ball behind the scenes, then you can't. So it's, oh, well, these guys aren't talking about this, so I guess this really isn't a story and this is just partisan hackery. No,
which is
they're just trying to
it's
make a
funny
buck.
because part of the basis behind this channel, somebody asked me just the other day. We were talking about trust and we were talking about game theory and we are talking about all kinds of stuff. And they said, well, how do you get around trust issues? And I had my answer is the Hulk answer. I was like, easy. I don't trust anybody, even family. Everybody's got a little something in for themselves. And if you can identify those things, then you know when to go along and when not to. And I can see where the Daily Wire has their interests in mind here.
Or at
And
least don't fully trust anyone, not even yourself,
oh
because
yeah,
you
yeah, no,
are
no, no.
biased as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's never like just questioning everything that comes out of somebody's mouth, but always know their motives. And it's different when they're in group versus out group. Like you're my in group, so that's a different scenario than someone I don't know telling me the same things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can still look at it from, well, how does this benefit Heath? Okay, well, our goals are in alignment. Great, awesome. Well, how does this benefit Heath? It's kind of the opposite of what I need. I don't personally think he's trying to do it to hurt me, but at the same time, it is still the opposite of what I need. Is that a sacrifice I want to make for my friend, or is that something that is kind of a deal breaker in this one situation? So you can kind of analyze those things, and these can be split second analyzations. It's fine as long as you practice it.
Mhm.
But you don't. Yeah, everybody is somehow in it for their own self, even if it seems altruistic at the moment, because altruism can be beneficial too. And if that's the case, go with it because everybody wins. But
Mhm.
also be ready to have to push back when it's something that's really where you'll be a doormat in that situation.
Yeah.
And yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about football because I've made myself grumpy and depressed enough.
Yeah, we have
Uh,
to
so,
because I was going to use
so
that meme as our cover photo.
yes,
I don't know.
I'm
I've got a
grumpy and
few.
depressed enough. So let's talk about my Cowboys Bills rematch that I talked about early in the season, completely falling apart this weekend. Not
Yeah,
not completely surprisingly, the Bills one. In hindsight, the Bills one shouldn't have been a surprise because of how they let Miami come back in that game. That the way the Bills defense kind of fell apart in the second half of that Miami game
I was
should have been a
hoping
clue.
it was a moment of having a lot of tape to learn from, but it turned out to not be the case.
Yeah.
I mean,
That
Cincinnati's talented, but Miami's offense is equally as talented. And
and what was really shocking about that game is that
well, Allen
um
was missing his throws. That first drive set the tone because Diggs was open. His corner had fallen down, and Allen missed him by 10 yards.
yeah, I'm curious how much the weather played an effect there. I mean, he went to college in Wyoming, so I you would think that he's used to playing in weather, but
Mhm.
he did not look like he had a good handle on the ball.
Well,
Uh,
I kind of want to look back at the Miami game because remember they did end up pumping the brakes and let Miami come back. I wonder if he might have got hurt in that game because remember
uh,
he had the elbow injury earlier in the season, and
and somebody that I was listening to, I don't remember who, pointed out that statistically he wasn't quite the same. And having him as my quarterback in fantasy, I can attest to that. Is that
yeah, we both
the
had broken quarterbacks.
the the
You had him, I had Herbert. Yeah.
the stats he scored up to that Jets game and then what he scored after were very different. So there's a little bit of that. But he threw didn't he throw 2 or 3 picks in the Miami game? So his
Mm-hmm.
his throws were a little off there too, yeah. And and the snow is just going to make it worse. But
Well,
what was
and that was my
surprising,
concern with Cincinnati is because the one thing about Buffalo is they're a cold weather city, but they're not a cold weather team.
which is something of an indictment on that coaching staff, or at least these last 2 games, because I forget his name. The head coach is a defensive guy, and then they have Leslie Frazier as their defensive coordinator, who's coached some really good defenses in the
But
past.
they didn't have the running game that you need in a
And
cold and it wasn't the defense that the defense could have just worn down because I
that
mean,
definitely happened in the Cowboys game.
yeah, the defense could have just worn down. If the
Mhm.
offense can't stay on the field for any given amount of time, which in
There
the
were a
snow
lot
you
of
need a
three and
run
outs.
game. Yeah,
There
you
were a
need a
lot
run
of three and
game.
outs. But so one of the local radio guys here said this about the Cowboys and Pollard, that which is a broken fibula, by the way. So he has to have surgery just to repair the bone, and then they can evaluate, okay, what happened to the ankle. Which
Well,
is
no,
really bad for that guy because he should have been on his way to a good contract.
okay, so no, here's the good thing, and of course I don't know the official diagnosis, but
Mhm.
if if he turned his ankle so he would have had to evert his foot to break the fibula.
Someone fell on it trying to bring him down, and it
Yeah.
went 90 degrees the wrong way.
And so if the fibula broke instead of the ligaments tearing, full recovery by next year.
Yeah. So
If the ligaments tore and the
and
fibula
yeah,
was broken, now we've got a long, lengthy recovery that
yeah,
may never be the same, unless he
exactly.
Barry Sanders 2
And
rolls of tape per ankle kind of
and
thing.
he's a pretty dynamic um player. That's his style.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the radio
Especially
guys
since
pointed out
Zeke has taken such a downturn in the last couple of years.
that if so somebody made the comment that the offense wasn't the same when Pollard went down. And the rebuttal to that was, look, if one person goes down and that just ruins your whole offense, that's a you problem. That's a team problem. That
Well,
demonstrates that your offense had issues to begin with. Same thing with the Buffalo defense, because I commented, I think before the divisional round, or maybe before the wild card round, that something concerning to me is that since Von Miller went out, they haven't had that pressure that you need in those obvious passing situations. And same thing there. If you miss one person that much, that kind of demonstrates you've got deeper issues.
there's two things that go into it. Uh, the price tag. Right. So if you lose one guy who is a significant amount of your salary cap, that
Hmm.
makes sense. But that's not Pollard. Pollard kind of had his breakout year this year. I mean, he was getting paid well, but he wasn't getting paid, you know, Le'Veon Bell screwing the
He
Steelers
wasn't getting
money. You
paid.
know,
Yeah,
yeah. Uh,
top running back, number
Todd
one running back
Gurley
kind of
taking
money.
a downturn when he signed his contract, kind of money.
Mhm.
Uh,
Zeke taking a downturn when he signed his.
yeah, pretty much. That don't bring back my comments. But the other part of it is, and this is where Von Miller comes in. He was a specialty player getting paid a lot of money. And then when you lost that little thing, well, you didn't have something to replace it with because you only have salary cap. You only have so much money to spend. But then with Pollard in this situation, he was the key to that 49ers defense if they were going to have any success. So the second part of that is game plan.
Mm-hmm.
And you you lose him, you lose the part, the kind of the linchpin to this whole game plan that a really amazing defense has very few chinks in its armor. It's like losing your rapier against the guy wearing plate mail, right? Now you're hacking with a sword and you're hoping you're getting through. Whereas the plate mail lost its flavor after crossbows and rapiers were invented because you just kind of poked him in the chink in the armor. But and so they lost that because Zeke wasn't that. Zeke is a power runner. He's up the middle, and that's not going to go through. The Niners are going to have none of that.
No.
And when it comes to pass coverage, Dak
Well,
is Dak is talented, but at the same time, he's not talented enough to be the guy to beat the San Francisco defense.
and that's why the the only upside to having Zeke under contract really was some of their best plays are when they have both of them on the field at the same time
Mm-hmm.
because you have to play both. You don't know, are they going to give it to Zeke between the tackles, or is Pollard going to swing it out wide, or is Zeke going to stay in to pass block and Pollard goes out in the flats on a pass
Well,
play?
Zeke got paid, and then 2 years into that, you could see the downturn. And now you're as a team, you're making a decision. And if it was the Texans, they would have cut him and taken the dead cap and had nobody there, and we still suck. If it was the Cowboys, they're like, well, we could cut him and have dead cap, or we can keep him and at least have someone on the field. And they made the decision to have him on the field.
Because what's more important is butts in seats and protecting the franchise. How many empty seats were there in that Eagles game we went to? And
Okay.
how much green was there there? They
He's talking
they
about the
don't.
Eagles game we went to in
Yeah,
Houston. Yeah.
yeah. So Jerry doesn't work that way. He will not have empty seats. So he would rather you have an average team that gives people hope and protects the franchise than screw it. We are going to cut all the dead weight. We are going to stink for 2 years while we rebuild. He won't
Well,
do that.
well, and it's contradicting decisions when it comes to the Texans because they'll cut the guy to send a message and then sign that next big stupid contract. Whereas the only reason cutting the guy makes sense because you lose a body and you still lose the money, including cap room. So you can't replace that person. So that's the thing. You keep them around and just deal with the bad decision you made, or you cut them to send a message. And then the next time that person wants big money, you say, look, as an organization, remember what happened with this person that wanted the big money? We need an assurance that you're going to perform for that big money. And but they never take that next step.
This brings me to your meme and Dak and where I have some empathy for the guy because I've mentioned before I know people who know him. So I'm
Well,
no
I've met
I
him. Remember, he
yeah.
won't remember me from Adam, but I mean, obviously, I'll remember I met Dak Prescott,
I
and he
I
was he was pretty awesome to hang out with.
I exactly, and that is exactly what I have heard secondhand from people who have spent, no, I won't say a significant amount of time, but a significant amount of time for a normal person, for a non-football person, right?
Well,
And
maybe he will remember that time he lost in cornhole to that little white dude in Houston. But
well, the little white dude and his big friend. Because
well, but compared to Dak,
yeah,
he's still small too.
and I think he probably had Tyron with him because they hang out a lot.
It was some big giant lineman, yeah.
So one of the problems with that ridiculous contract, besides how much cap hit it's going to take, especially in the next couple of years, because the way they structured it is it's kind of backloaded, and the window for Dallas is going to close very quickly because the next couple of years, it's a $40 million a year contract, but that's not how these contracts ever work, right? So the cap hit the next couple of years is going to be like 50 something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So because it was only 20 something this year. So one of the things you like about him is his intangibles, that X factor, the thing that makes everyone in the locker room like him. The downside to that is I think he feels genuine pressure to meet that $40 million.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure
Well,
he's capable of it.
and that's a good thing because I hate the guys that take it for granted. But at the same time, yeah, you have to have that special personality to deal with that pressure, and that's where someone like Pollard comes in because when you have that safety net,
So
all the greats had a safety net. I mean, Joe Montana had Jerry Rice, Steve Young had Jerry Rice, uh, Kurt Warner had Marshall Faulk, Isaac Bruce, uh,
so that's
Torrey
actually
Holt.
again a personal example here is one of my higher picks was Schultz because looking at the stats last year in fantasy points, he scored the second most out of tight ends. He scored more than Goddard and Kittle. He was just behind Kelsey. Why? Because last year Dak didn't take as many chances. He took the dump offs. And statistically, he had a much better year. He was, he was a 300 yard a game, one or two touchdowns, half an interception, right? And this year he led the league in interceptions and he missed 5 games.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason Schultz did not work out for me, looking at how he performed in the 49ers game, I don't know how much his head was in the game anyway, because he made some boneheaded plays like he
Well,
wasn't
but
even
again,
trying.
let's go to Pollard too. How open are you going to be as an underneath tight end when there's also an amazing running back coming out of the backfield?
Well,
They're
no,
going to
but
prioritize that guy.
it wasn't just that. Watching the games, because I'm in the area, so I get them every week, and that's because I hate myself. That's the team I follow. Um, Dak was throwing it downfield a lot more than he did last year. That's one of the reasons Schultz wasn't getting the numbers, is because he wasn't getting the targets because he's that medium route guy.
Mm-hmm.
And Dak was throwing it downfield and he was pushing. He was throwing it into coverage that he should not have been throwing into. That's where the interceptions were coming from.
Well, yeah, and I missed a lot of this game, which was unfortunate because I picked San Francisco and I was really looking forward to it, but I was in a social situation where there was a lot of interaction. But I did see Dak pushing it to the new receiver, T.Y. Higgins.
Hilton.
T.Y. Hilton a lot.
The old new
Yeah.
receiver.
And the throws just being a little off.
Mm-hmm.
Just being a little off.
Yeah, and they picked up Hilton to be their deep threat because Gallup still isn't 100% because he had a late ACL tear last year. And he's supposed to be their deep threat guy as kind of their number 2 to Lamb. And Lamb's going to get a lot of double coverage.
I wonder whatever came out of it because remember right before they got Hilton was the Odell Beckham sweepstakes, and Beckham just didn't end up going anywhere, did he?
I think that I don't think he's physically there yet because he also, I don't remember what it was.
He also
I don't know
had
if it was
that thing
knee or
where he was
ankle.
high on a plane while he was traveling around too. So I don't know how much that hurt him because it
Yeah.
kind of just the
Yep.
news stories just kind of died on it.
Yeah. So, and that may have been, I don't remember when that was, but they always send out private investigators on this stuff to make sure they're not buying a lemon. And they may have uncovered stuff like that. But I think the big one was he also had a late season injury. And I just don't think he was 100% enough. And he was probably wanting too much money for, I don't know if you can perform physically.
Mm-hmm.
So and I think that's why they picked up Hilton, is to be that deep threat guy, um, because they weren't getting it done in the wide receiver department. Again, because I like Gallup, he's done well in the past, but he tears his ACL late in the season, and you sign him for, he was probably a 10 to 12 million dollar second receiver on the open market, and you gave him 13 million. Hopefully next year he earns that money, because this year he sure didn't,
Mhm.
because he just physically wasn't there yet.
So let's go back to the Buffalo Cincy game, and let's go back.
Yes.
Let's go back several weeks to when they were supposed to play in the regular season. Uh, if Buffalo won that game several weeks ago, and they won the subsequent weeks like they did, they would have been playing Jacksonville this week. How big is that? The NFL said we fixed it all by having this possible neutral site championship. Buffalo didn't want to play Cincy round 2. They wanted Cincy and KC to beat each other up and then play the winner.
I don't remember what the records were going into that. If Cincy had won out,
if Buffalo won out, they had the tiebreakers over everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. So they controlled their own destiny.
If Cincy won out, they needed a loss by KC.
Yeah. So KC would have had to lose one, and then Cincy would have had the tiebreakers because they beat Buffalo head to head.
So knowing what happened with KC would have had it, or Buffalo would have had it, because Cincy would have never had it because KC won out.
Okay.
So that's a legit hindsight, because nothing changed for KC on the way up, except for what happened in the other game that didn't go. So when you're talking about the individual versus the team versus everybody versus the fans versus the larger scale situation as a whole, hopefully he's got some of the right people talking to him right now, but there's a good chance that DeMar is sitting there thinking it's his fault. This is human nature. You take responsibility for things you were involved in, whether you could have done anything or not. That's why you needed to finish the game. If you cared about that individual, you would have finished the game.
I was actually going to bring up DeMar Hamlin here, because I found it creepy and a little ghoulish how they were treating him during the broadcast. I don't know where you were watching, so you might not have heard it.
I did not have sound. No.
So
I was at the mall, remember, watching these.
Okay, it's
a strip of the mall that's all restaurants. So for those that I wasn't watching it in a Foot Locker or something, but but no, it's all restaurants. I watched that one at Bar Louie, and then I was at Yard House for the other one.
So the way they kept going to him, and it was kind of weird to begin with, because he was all hooded up, and I think he even had a mask on. It was like, are you trying to create controversy and make a conspiracy theory that that's not really you?
Well, the thing about that is his lungs were fucked up from the situation.
Yeah.
So he could be wearing a mask for all pathogens at that point.
He could.
Masks were for bacterial pathogens.
From reporting, he's still on oxygen.
Yeah.
So he's probably carting around a little oxygen container.
Yeah, and that could have been fluid buildup or the compressions or a lot of things that could have messed those lungs up.
It was weird and ghoulish. And as we said last time when we talked COVID, isn't it curious that everyone who said this might be a thing I'm not sure we're allowed to talk about, you're dummies. Oh, okay, we'll just wait for the report to come out and for the official statement. I guess that'll come out when the Las Vegas shooter comes out. But anyway, the other thing that is weird and ghoulish about it is the emotional obsession with it, because we saw it on camera. I had not heard about this, and this is a big effing story. You remember Peyton Hillis? Because you had him on your fantasy teams for a while.
Yeah, he's dead.
He had some good years. No, he made it through.
Oh, he made it. Oh.
So this is January 23rd. So this is yesterday.
That's awesome news.
Former NFL star Peyton Hillis discharged from hospital weeks after rescue. He was in
I got to look back
ICU.
where I saw that because the story I read
Really?
said he died. And I freaking just closed the story and was so sad because of the nature of how. And
So while this Damar Hamlin, before this Damar Hamlin thing happened, he rescued saving after saving his children from drowning in a lake. So talk about a heart tug on your heartstrings story, and yet never heard it in any, even watching a couple of Cleveland games, never heard it referenced once on any broadcast. I don't watch the pregame stuff like I used to because it annoys me. So maybe someone mentioned it there, but this was going on
I
for
think I saw it
weeks
on
because
Instagram because I have a lot of football pages on my
he was in
feed.
intensive care for weeks and wasn't sure he was going to make it. And I did not hear about this until I heard Whitlock talking about it, and I went, "Wait, what? What happened? I know that name. What happened to him?"
Well, I'm actually that gave me a very happy moment in this thing that's been dark up until now because I had read the story that he had passed,
Hmm.
and to see that he made it is amazing. That's great. And speedy recovery, man. I know you don't know me, but speedy recovery. There was a local guy here north of Houston. There's a couple lakes, Livingston and Conroe, and I don't remember which one it was. It was one of those two, and there's a dam in there, and apparently there's an undercurrent in certain parts
Hmm.
of the lake that'll suck you in. And the I guess they're on a pontoon boat or something, and the kids were in the water, and one of them got sucked in, and dad immediately jumped in, pulled the kid up to the surface where everybody else was able to get the kid out, but dad disappeared. He never came out. They never even found the body. He got
Yikes.
sucked under. But yeah, that's those dad moments. And people talk about women in the workplace, and we look at life expectancy. Men die, and this is from an evolutionary biological standpoint, social psychology, social biology. Men die young because we're designed to be dads. Women die later because they're designed to be grandmas. That's just the way it is. We know they're designed to be grandmas because they go through menopause, which is that point in your no, it's the point in a woman's life where it's not beneficial to the group to have more babies, but it is beneficial to the group that you stay alive and take care of babies. Where men, we front load, which is why myocarditis is a big issue with us men in our early 20s and late teens, because our heart is hyperactive to be hyper performing, which is why we shouldn't have men that dress up as women competing in sports, because the heart is the big deal. And when we get
What
injected with
what
things,
was the Lance Armstrong controversy? Blood doping. That
mm-hmm,
was what cyclists were doing, is they were taking red blood cells
their own
and
red blood cells.
their own
Yeah.
red blood cells, and they would freeze them, they would save them, and then for competitions, they would put that back in so they had extra oxygen.
And we front load that in our 20s. We peak in our mid to late 20s. That's why TRT is such a big deal, because I can extend the life of my cardiac production, but I put myself at risk of other things. So I can be younger longer and die sooner.
I had a
But that's
video
why,
function
because
share.
we're the ones that pull the drowning kids out.
Yeah.
That's why. Everybody talks about
And it's
mama bear. Mama bear protecting the kids. Daddy bear protects the kids. Daddy bear
and
protects everybody's kids
and
if
it
you're
is
in a good tribe.
instinctual.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is
and it's
instinctual.
instinctual. And you know exactly when to do it. Daddy bear protects the women. I had to be daddy this last weekend with one of my own friends because he went too far, and I had to take a 6'4", 250-pound man and back him into a corner. But it was appropriate.
Mhm.
But that's why we die young too. We front load. unless you take TRT, and then you still die young, but you just kind of are younger until you die. So,
Yeah. Football is a stupid sport. Why do I follow it?
well, one of my teams is still in it, so I can still come out of this saving some face because that defense is fucking amazing. But who was that? We haven't even talked about the other games because who was even surprised? Jacksonville played hard. I will
What
give them that. That game I was paying a lot of attention to.
I
They
I
played
I,
really hard.
I was surprised that the Saturday games weren't even close. Uh,
Why? Because
Philadelphia just,
it was number one against low seed. That's why. I mean,
but but
the Giants are a streaky team, which is a sign of lack of depth. When they're on, they're on.
but they came on at the end of the season. They seemed to have it together, and I thought the matchup worked well because they had a good front four, a good athletic front four that I thought
The
would
Eagles
contain
spanked them
Hurts
in the
at
last
least a
week of the
little bit.
season.
They didn't spank them, and
I mean, it
the
was like 30 something to the teens. It's spanking.
it was relatively close considering that was a preseason game for the Giants.
Mhm.
They weren't playing anybody. They played like a series and then sat everybody because everything was locked in. So because they were able to make it at least somewhat competitive that last game, and because of the matchup, because the way the Giants play is they are a run the ball, play action, control the clock team. That's what you want to do against a team like the Eagles. It surprised me that it wasn't even close, and also that Cincy Buffalo game, Buffalo was playing behind from the beginning, and they looked like they could never get anything going, offensively or defensively. That's what surprised me about that. And then on
That wasn't a
Sunday,
Saturday game. KC
I
Jacksonville was Saturday. That's what
okay,
I'm saying. Jacksonville played hard.
okay, I had a mix.
Yeah.
I thought the two blowouts were on the same day.
I'm telling
Uh,
you right now, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be all right. I think
yeah,
Jacksonville's not the place for him, but I think he's going to be all right. He's the next
I
Matthew Stafford that's got to
I
take
th
his lumps and then go somewhere else.
I don't know. It depends on how well Doug Peterson does. I think that's a big boon for him is having someone who's very quarterback minded.
Jacksonville, it's not about Doug Peterson, it's about the
It's
front
about the
office.
organization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they do the same stupid crap with contracts that the Texans
Yeah.
do, where they'll try to build a team to win it right now and then do make a lot of stupid mistakes in the process.
Mhm.
And so you'll have the number one defense one year and then 30 the next year. It's
Yeah. Yeah. That was them the last time they were in the playoffs was because that defense was ridiculous. That was the defense that Jalen Ramsey came from. And you know, all their games were like 12-9.
but I think
Um,
Lawrence is going to be okay. He's won on too many levels for too long. And just watching him play, he's making some bonehead mistakes, but he's making the same bonehead mistakes like Peyton Manning made when he was young.
yeah. I was impressed with how close they played that game. And I was half impressed, half
Well, you
this
know
is what
what?
I
You watching that game, Christian Kirk dropped like five legit perfect balls.
mhm.
And you get those five back. I mean, there were 40-yard plays, 30-yard plays. You get those five plays back, or three of the five. Get three of the five plays back. And it was what a score and a half game, realistically, at
Mhm.
the end. That's the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh the Cowboys are because I'm too emotionally involved, it's hard for me to uh look at them objectively. So I was 50-50 going into that game. The angry emotional fan side was they're going to get blown out and it's going to be embarrassing, but the more logical side was I think Dan Quinn and that defense has shown enough this year because even the games they lost because
Yeah,
they
Quinn's going to
lost
be a
because
head
of why
coach
they
somewhere
lost
next
last
year.
time. Yeah,
So,
the games they lost in the regular season were exactly uh like Sunday night. It's the it was the offense couldn't get anything together, couldn't get it going, but the defense held up and did their part of the job. Just intellectually, I thought Quinn could do what I thought Pete Carroll might do. But here's what was so impressive about Purdy is they didn't expose him, they didn't embarrass him, they just stymied him. He couldn't statistically, he couldn't get anything going. They also held, I think both McCaffrey and Samuel both had under 100 total yards. If you would have
Kittle
told
had
me
some big plays though.
if you would have told me ahead of the game, Debo and McCaffrey are both going to have under 100 yards, and I'd say, oh, Cowboys are going to eke it out. They're going to win. But what happened was what I thought would happen is that the defense would keep it close, but the offense wouldn't be able to handle the San Francisco defense.
Hey man, we've got some good matchups for these championship games. And of all four teams that are still in, any combination of those is going to make for a great Super Bowl. So that's going to be I'm looking forward to this one, not just for the food this year. Although I'll have to figure out something different for Cincy because the chili was what we came up with last time. That was good chili, though. That was good chili. I had a thought, and I'm trying to remember what it was.
If so, my final thought would just be, well, might as well predict here. And
KC,
I
San Fran.
no,
No, you don't think
I,
so?
I think Cincy Philly.
You think Cincy, Philly? Oh, so we're complete opposites on the combination there.
I think what Dan Quinn was able to do against Kyle Shanahan in that offense, I think they set a blueprint for a good Philadelphia defense. And I think they'll learn from that. And if they can do half of what the Dallas defense did, Dallas lost that game because quite frankly, they did not have a quarterback who could take advantage of it.
Yeah, but how many
Jalen
games?
Hurts.
How many games are those two star players that you just mentioned going to be off? One
Yeah.
of the two at least is going to show up next
But
week.
that's why I say if they can do half of what Dallas did, I mean, because take away that last score, that touchdown, Dallas held San Fran to 12 points. And then very late in the game, they had that long drive because that defense was completely gassed. And then, the offense goes out there and gets 3 and out, and
Yeah,
then they're
so
back on the
you say
field.
only they need half, and I don't agree with that, but I will say that Dallas has a much better defense than Philly. And
Yeah.
Philly's defense looks good because they're typically playing from ahead, which lets you tee off. But I think if San Fran can come out and score early, that changes the game completely. Yeah. And those two weapons you just talked about, plus Kittle, and plus that Ayuk, he's that young kid has got a future, man. If he stays healthy, he reminds me of, I'm going to cross sports in this reference. He reminds me of like a Manu Ginobili, where he looks wild, but he's always got it right there. And yeah, that kid as a second receiver, he's going to be a first receiver somewhere in the next couple of years. And if they can keep him around for a couple of years, you can have at least a mini dynasty between him and Samuel.
The reason I say Philly is because if Philly can keep San Fran to just 20 to 25 points, I think Philly scores 30 something.
Well, here's the wild card. How hurt is Hurts? He took no damage in that Giants game. San Francisco is going to hurt him.
Well, no, but see, there's where Hurts is more athletic than Dak is, and Dak was under a lot of pressure the whole game. I don't think he got.
But they're going to play him
sacked that much.
But they're going to play him different.
They're going to play him different.
No, they're going to have Hufanga, Spy, Hurts the whole time, and Hufanga will. He's Palomalu Jr. is what he is. He will come and lay the wood whenever he has a chance. And it's going to be.
I think Hurts is athletic enough to make the difference. He won't run all over.
But he's also slightly hurt. If we were talking about the injury that one time, if it's the AC joint, maybe he's going to be fine because he just has to fall super wrong to have it run. But if it's the other one, any hit to the chest is going to be just build and build and build till he can't even move that arm. And
but he makes better decisions than Dak does. Look how Mahomes played hurt
He's
because he
young.
doesn't
He's
do
young. He
stupid
sporadically
things.
makes better decisions.
He well, he is younger. That's an indictment on Dak and his $40 million contract
Yeah.
is Hurts plays like a more experienced quarterback than Dak did this year.
Well, but let me go back to my sports days. How much of that, when I was fighting, how much of that is the fact that there's just so much more film on Dak
Yeah.
for bad tendencies that you can exploit? Where Hurts is, I mean, he's remember the year Colin Kaepernick had, where nobody could stop him, but there was
Yeah.
also zero film on him, and he came back the next year, and
It figured
everybody had a
out
playbook.
very quick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, but again, there's not a ton of time to figure it out. Maybe now D'Amico Ryans and now here's what's interesting about
Oh,
San
that's
Fran.
what that was the thought. That was the thought I had. He's the front runner now for the Houston Texans job, so
Uh,
I'm
what's
happy
what's
about that.
interesting about his defense is Dan Quinn was able to take a defense that was one of the worst the year before, and there wasn't a ton of personnel change when he came in a couple of years ago, or last year, was it? I don't remember. When he came in, there wasn't a ton of personnel change. It was all Dan Quinn's scheme and coaching. D'Amico Ryans doesn't scheme a lot. He just has his people playing very solid and has a really good game plan, and they
Which
just
is why I
beat
think he's
straight
going to be
up.
a better head coach than a DC, because it's not about scheming as a head coach. It's
Mhm.
about getting your team behind you.
It's about
And
it's about being prepared for the other team, having a
mhm.
good game plan, and then
But
executing.
there's also something to the fact that he, if you really break it down, how much of his just base scheme is very difficult to penetrate.
Mhm.
And, oh
Well,
wow,
we'll
uh,
see.
the street in front of me is completely flooded.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
So
Houston.
at least it didn't knock my internet out. Anything else we want to go into, or I think that
Nope.
we've talked for 2 hours and 15 minutes ish.
Yep. And hopefully we ended on a more positive note. And I'm not sure how I'll feel if it's. I mean, I guess I kind of like Cincy, but I will be so uninterested if I'm right. I will be pretty darn uninterested in the Super Bowl.
Well, just in case briskets were on sale the other day, I bought one in case Kansas City gets there. Either
That's a
way,
good
I'll have a
plan.
brisket at some point. Uh,
It's a good plan.
and I wouldn't mind Philly cheesesteaks again. I will repeat that one. Those were good that day. And I do have actually a prime rib roast in the freezer because they were on sale one time. So
Nice.
I've got that ready. San Fran. I mean, it could be any food. You talked about the needles, but
Yeah.
we'll figure something out. Maybe we'll do a
Yeah.
shot where you do it in one of those little
China.
things you squeeze out.
Chinese food. I mean, San Francisco, Chinatown's a big deal. You just
Yeah,
do
but
Chinese
you know what
food.
I'm talking about? Those little syringes you do shots in.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
we'll make shots in those for San Fran.
Oh, that's gonna make for an interesting Super Bowl drinking game. All right. Well, we'll see y'all Thursday for more Lord of Chaos chaos.
Yeah, I've got too much car stuff going on to do Wednesday. So,
Yeah.
all
So
right.
we'll get dark and terrible next Tuesday.
All right. Talk to y'all guys later.